Most people in my family think I just shuffle papers for the military. They call me our little soldier with that patronizing smile, like I'm still 5 years old playing dress up in my dad's old uniform. They don't ask what I actually do, and honestly, I stopped offering answers a long time ago. To them, I'm just Melissa, the quiet niece who never posts on Facebook, the one who shows up to family weddings in the same pair of plain black heels. They think the Air Force is some kind of extended boot camp where I take orders and fill out forms in a dull office building somewhere near DC. I never corrected them. It's easier that way. People tend to fear what they don't understand, and my job isn't the kind of thing you explain over Thanksgiving turkey. Besides, I've found that invisibility has its advantages. Still, it stings sometimes. Like when my Uncle Richard leans over during dinner to ask if I've killed anyone, in that half-joking, half-serious tone. Or when my cousin tries to set me up with a real professional, because, in her words, you deserve someone who's actually doing well. They don't see what I do as valuable. Not because it isn't, but because it isn't flashy. What they don't know is that my quiet uniform comes with a Yankee white SEI clearance, a level higher than most senators. They don't see the nights I spend reviewing satellite feeds and coordinating airspace denial assets in unstable regions. They have no idea that my silence isn't because I have nothing to say, but because what I know is classified top secret. I serve in the Air Force Office of Special Projects. I don't fly the planes. I tell them where the kill zones are. I manage the invisible fences in the sky that protect national assets. I've made peace with the misunderstanding. Mostly. But every once in a while, someone pushes too far. Someone crosses a line they didn't even know was there. And when that happens, the truth has a way of stepping into the light, whether they're ready for it or not. The engagement party was held at a country club so polished it looked like it had been pressure washed with money. Glass chandeliers sparkled overhead. A string quartet played softly while servers floated by with tiny lamb chops balanced on silver trays. I wore a simple navy dress and heels I'd resoled twice. My cousins wore designer gowns that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I stayed near the edge of the room, sipping club soda and trying not to draw attention. That strategy usually worked, but not that night. Richard spotted me halfway through his second scotch and waved me over like I was a valet who'd parked his Bentley. Richard wasn't just my uncle. He was a defense contractor, the kind who sold overpriced bolts to the Navy and acted like he won the war himself. "Melissa," he called out, loud enough to hush the nearby conversations. "Still driving that charming little sedan from the bush, Era?" His voice carried, and the laughter that followed wasn't cruel, exactly. Just easy, effortless, the way people laugh when they know the joke isn't on them. I gave a tight smile and nodded. "Still runs, Uncle Richard." I took a sip to avoid saying more. The truth was, my car was reliable and deliberately forgettable, just like me. Richard raised his glass, clearly amused by my response. Then he leaned in, voice dripping with benevolence, masked as generosity. "Listen, we've got the Gulf Stream flying down to the wedding in Aruba tomorrow. I'll squeeze you in." His smile widened. "But please don't bring that duffel bag you always drag around. And try not to frighten the investors with talk of government budgets." A couple of the guests chuckled behind him. My cousin Lauren, the bride-to-be, gave me that pitying look she'd perfected since college. She reached over and gently touched my arm like I was a wounded stray. "If you don't have something that fits the dress code, Mel, I can send you one of my backup dresses. Something less military." It wasn't the first time I'd been treated like the family's charity project, but it hit harder that night. Maybe it was the way the laughter paused just long enough to let the silence hum with judgment. Or perhaps I was tired of pretending that I didn't care. I opened my mouth to decline the offer, but Richard cut me off with a wink. "Don't be stubborn, Melissa. You can't miss Lauren's big day just because you can't afford the ticket. I'm doing you a favor." I glanced around the room and saw the same looks I always did. Smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. People pretend to include me just long enough to feel good about themselves. I'd seen it all before. But this time, something felt different. I knew Richard's flight path. I knew where he was flying. And I knew something he didn't. There was a red flag exercise scheduled for the southeastern corridor tomorrow. Live fire drills, restricted airspace, a no-fly zone that didn't appear on civilian GPS yet. If he flew his usual route, he was going to fly straight into a missile test range. I could have warned him right then. I could have pulled out my phone, shown him the NOTAM, Notice to Airmen, and explained the danger. But looking at his smug face, listening to him belittle my career, I realized he wouldn't listen. He never listened to the clerk. So I smiled again, this time slower. "Thanks, Uncle Richard. I'll take the ride." His eyes lit up, pleased with himself. He thought he'd won, that I'd accepted the crumbs he offered from his table of wealth and relevance. He didn't realize he'd just invited the very person who wrote the rules of engagement onto his plane. People assume quiet means weak, that if you don't speak up, you must not have much to say. In my world, silence isn't emptiness, it's protocol. Everything about my life outside the base is designed to disappear. My apartment is plain, neutral walls, no photos, nothing personal. My car is a gray compact model with a dent in the side panel. No one looks twice at it in the parking lot, and that's the point. My clearance means I carry information in my head that could shift national policy. I've sat in classified briefings where a mistimed word could compromise human lives. Being underestimated is an asset. If people think you're harmless, they don't guard themselves. They talk freely. They show their hand. That's when you learn the most. I let Richard believe I'm a glorified secretary because it keeps my real work protected. If he knew what I actually do, he'd either exploit it or panic. The duffel bag he mocked? It wasn't full of gym clothes. It contained a hardened biometric locked laptop capable of interfacing with the NORAD defense grid. It was my mobile command station. I brought it with me the next morning to the private airfield. Richard was already there, standing by the sleek white Gulfstream G650, shouting into his phone. He looked the part of the master of the universe. Linen suit, loafers, sunglasses. "I don't care about the headwinds," he yelled at someone. "We have a dinner reservation at sunset. Tell the pilot to burn the fuel. I want to be there in 4 hours." He hung up and saw me. "Ah, the stowaway arrives," he said, grinning. "Throw your bag in the hold, Melissa, and try to keep up." I didn't throw my bag in the hold. I kept it on my shoulder. "I'll keep this with me," I said. Richard rolled his eyes. "Fine. Just don't clutter the aisle." We boarded. The interior was cream leather and gold trim. Champagne was already on ice. It was a flying palace. I sat in the jump seat near the galley, away from the main group. I didn't want champagne. I wanted to monitor the situation. As the jet taxied, I pulled out my tablet. I wasn't playing Candy Crush. I was logging into the secure flight tracking system. The pilot came over the intercom. "Folks, we're looking at a smooth ride, but we might have to take a slight detour south. Air traffic control is reporting some military activity in Sector 4. Richard hit the call button immediately. "Captain, this is Richard. Ignore the detour. I'm paying for a direct flight. We're burning daylight. Sir, the pilot's voice came back, hesitant. Sector 4 is marked restricted. It's a military training zone. It's the weekend, Richard scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. The military doesn't work on weekends. They're all at BBQs. Just fly the route. If anyone complains, I'll call Senator Hawkins. He owes me a favor. I stiffened. He was going to do it. He was going to fly a civilian aircraft into a live-fire kinetic box because he thought his money made him bulletproof. I unbuckled my seatbelt and walked up to Richard's seat. Uncle Richard, I said softly. You can't do that, he laughed, clinking glasses with his business partner. Relax, Melissa. This is how the real world works. You push a little, and people get out of the way. This isn't the real world, I said. It's controlled airspace. If you cross that line, they won't send a fine. They'll send interceptors. He waved me off. You've been filing too many forms, sweetheart. You're paranoid. Sit down and enjoy the free booze. I looked at him. I saw the arrogance that had protected him his whole life. He truly believed that rules were for poor people. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I went back to my seat. I opened my laptop. I authenticated my biometric ID. Access granted. User Colonel M. Reed, USAF Special Projects. I pulled up the real-time radar feed. I saw our jet, a small blue dot, climbing to 40,000 feet. And directly in our path, I saw the red zone, the kill box, and inside that box, 2 fast-moving amber contacts were patrolling. F-35 Lightning IIs, loaded for bear. I sat back. I waited. Richard wanted to push. He was about to find out what happens when you push back against a mountain. 30 minutes later, the atmosphere in the cabin changed. We had crossed the line. I saw it on my screen before anyone felt it. The transponder on our jet had just been tagged as hostile, unidentified. The music in the cabin stopped. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, and this time, he wasn't polite. He was terrified. Mr. Reed, Richard, we have a problem. What is it now? Richard groaned. I have a military aircraft on my wing. 2 of them. They're signaling us to turn immediately. Richard stood up, stumbling slightly. What? Let me see. He rushed to the window. I didn't need to look. I knew what was out there. A roar cracked the air, vibrating through the fuselage of the private jet. It was a sound deeper and louder than thunder. Richard screamed. Outside the window, not 50 feet away, was a gray F-35 fighter jet. It was close enough that you could see the pilot's helmet. The fighter jet dipped its wing, the universal sign for follow me or die. Then, the second jet roared past the other side, shaking the Gulf Stream violently. They're armed, someone yelled. Oh my God, they have missiles. Richard went pale. Call them. Tell them who I am. Tell them I know the senator. The pilot's voice crackled, bordering on panic. They aren't responding to civilian frequencies, sir. They've locked radar on us. They're forcing us down. Forced down? Richard shouted. Where? There's an Air Force base 20 miles out. They're escorting us in. Sir, if I don't turn, they will shoot us down. That is a confirmation. Richard collapsed into his seat. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of a man who realizes his money is useless against a heat-seeking missile. Do it, he whispered. Land. I sat calmly in my jump seat. I typed a message into my secure laptop. Target, civilian Gulfstream, tail number N4599, do not engage. Payload, VIP on board, code, Valkyrie, requesting ground security meet. I hit enter. On the radar screen, the amber dots of the fighter jets changed to green. They stopped aggressive maneuvers and fell into an escort formation. They knew, but Richard didn't. He was hyperventilating in his leather recliner. We began our descent, not to a luxury resort in Aruba, but to a restricted military airfield in the middle of nowhere. The landing was rough. We hit the tarmac hard. We didn't taxi to a terminal. We were directed to a remote holding apron, far away from the hangars. Through the window, I saw the reception committee. It wasn't customs. It wasn't the police. It was the base security forces. Defenders. 6 Humvees with turret gunners. 2 trucks full of soldiers in full tactical gear. They surrounded the plane before the engines even spun down. They had their rifles raised. "What is happening?" Lauren cried, clutching her fiancé. "Are we going to jail?" Richard was sweating profusely. "It's a mistake. It's just a misunderstanding. I'll clear this up." The cabin door opened, but it wasn't the flight attendant opening it. It was breached from the outside. "Hands! Let me see hands!" 4 soldiers stormed the luxury cabin. They wore helmets, body armor, and balaclavas. They pointed M4 carbines at Richard, at Lauren, at the investors. "Everyone remain seated. Hands on your heads." Richard tried to stand up. "Now wait a minute. I'm a donor." "Sit down." A soldier shoved him back into the seat with the barrel of his rifle. "Do not move." Richard put his hands on his head, trembling. He looked small. He looked pathetic. The team leader entered the cabin, a senior master sergeant. He looked furious. Breaching restricted airspace during a live fire exercise is a federal crime. It puts pilots at risk. It puts the nation at risk. He scanned the terrified passengers. "Who is the owner of this aircraft?" the sergeant barked. "I am," Richard squeaked. "Richard Sterling. I have contacts." "Mr. Sterling," the sergeant said, his voice like gravel. "You just violated a federal exclusion zone. You nearly caused a mid-air collision with a stealth fighter. You are under arrest for endangerment and unauthorized entry into a defense area." "Arrest?" Richard gasped. The sergeant pulled out zip ties. "Get up." Then the sergeant's radio crackled. "Lead, this is command. We have a code Valkyrie on the manifest. Confirm ID of passenger. Read, Melissa." The sergeant froze. He put a hand to his earpiece. "Say again, command?" "Code Valkyrie. A Colonel Reed is on board that aircraft. Secure the asset." The sergeant's eyes went wide behind his tactical glasses. He looked around. The cabin again. He looked past the weeping bride, past the terrified investors, past the trembling Richard. He looked at me. I was sitting in the jump seat, my laptop closed on my lap. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was waiting. I stood up slowly. "Stay down!" a young airman yelled at me, pointing his weapon. "Stand down, airman!" the sergeant roared, shoving the barrel of the gun away. The sergeant walked toward me. The aggression vanished from his posture, replaced by rigid, terrified discipline. He stopped 3 feet from me. He snapped to attention. He saluted. "Ma'am," he shouted. "My apologies. We didn't know you were on board." The silence in the cabin was absolute. Richard lowered his hands slowly. He looked at the sergeant. He looked at me. "Ma'am," Richard whispered. I returned the salute casually. "At ease, Sergeant." "Colonel," the sergeant said, his voice shaking slightly. "The base commander is en route. We almost engaged this aircraft. If you hadn't flagged the transponder—" "I know," I said calmly. "You did your job. The pilot violated a NOTAM." I looked at Richard. "This man ordered the violation," I said, pointing at my uncle. "He ignored my warning about the restricted airspace." The sergeant turned to Richard. The look of respect was gone, replaced by pure disgust. "You ignored a colonel's warning?" the the sergeant growled. Richard stammered. She's just a clerk. She files papers. The sergeant looked at me. A clerk, ma'am? I pulled my badge from my pocket. I clipped it to my dress. Colonel Melissa Reed, United States Air Force. Strategic Airspace Integration, I said. I draw the lines on the map that tell the F-35s where to shoot. Richard stared at the badge. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Get him off my plane, I said. Yes, ma'am. The sergeant gestured to his men. Take him and the pilot, federal custody. They grabbed Richard. They weren't gentle. They zip-tied his hands behind his back and hauled him out of his leather seat. Melissa! Richard screamed as they dragged him down the aisle. Help me! Tell them! We're family! I stood in the aisle, blocking his path. I looked him in the eye. Family listens, Richard, I said quietly. You never listened. They dragged him out the door. 5 minutes later, a black staff car pulled up to the plane. The base commander, a 1-star general, stepped out. He walked up the stairs. He saw me. He shook my head. Colonel Reed, he said, you have a hell of a way of making an entrance. Sorry about the mess, General, I said. Civilian contractors. You know how they are. We'll hold them for questioning, the general said. FAA is going to have a field day with his license. He won't be flying for a long time. He looked at the rest of the passengers, my cousins, the investors. They were huddled in their seats, terrified to move. What about them? The general asked. They're harmless, I said. Let them call a commercial flight after they give their statements. And you? I have a briefing in D.C. on Monday, I said, but I wouldn't mind a lift to the terminal. My driver is waiting, the general said. I grabbed my duffel bag, the one Richard had mocked. I walked down the stairs of the jet. The sun was setting over the airfield. The F-35s were taxiing back to the hangars. I walked past the police car where Richard was sitting in the back seat, furiously arguing with an MP. He saw me walking with the general. He saw the general open the car door for me. He stopped arguing. He just watched. He finally understood. The money, the suits, the jet, it was all just noise. Real power doesn't need to shout. It controls the sky. I got into the general's car. Where to, Colonel? The driver asked. Home, I said. I have some paperwork to file. I smiled. Invisibility has its advantages, but sometimes you have to remind the world that even the quietest storms can strike without warning.